Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Forgiven. Obviously, you have me, Pastor Logan. We're clearly missing somebody in the middle here. Pastor Mike's on vacation right now. Well, he will be at the time this episode goes out. So I pre-recorded one with two friends of mine. We've had reoccurring co-host, one of my good friends, everything, Pastor Bryce.
Yeah, I'm the substitute for when Pastor Mike can't make it. Second best.
Hey, don't you make that sound like you make that sound bad. You make me feel bad about it.
Good.
And then at the end of the table here we have Cam, who I've only recently got to know him, but it's been awesome.
I appreciate that.
He is one heck of a drummer. I can say that.
Thank you.
But B, he's like, I can just tell from the little bit that I've gotten to know him is just this like super well put together, educated, like Christian man who like supports the church and has like a lot of like knowledge and things to bring to the table. And he's like super musical, which is like a conversation that I would love to have maybe on a different podcast with you about using your musical talents in church and everything like that. But today, if you couldn't tell by the title already, we're talking about what makes a good godly man. And you might be wondering, you guys are just boys. What do you know about being godly men? Man. Well, that's kind of actually the purpose of having us on this episode specifically. The idea is this is going to be an ongoing series on answering the question of what is a godly man. And we're going to look at it through each generation of age of men and ask the question, what makes a good godly man? So I figured today, and I have to say this, I also have to give credit to Pastor Bryce because this is something that it was sort of his idea. I mean, God inspired it,
Yeah.
I would assume anyway.
Definitely.
And you brought it to me and I was like, yeah, I really want to support you in that. So I put together some stuff that like we normally do. But yeah, we're going to turn this into an ongoing series. And I thought, let's start with us. And the other reason is each of us are at a different stage of being a Christian man, right? I'm single. Bryce is married and just had his first child. Congratulations, by the way. And Cam is dating. So we kind of hit each level of life as Christian men. And so I thought this would be a really unique concoction of men to bring together. So enough of the introductions. Let's get right on into it. I guess the first question is, what makes a good godly man? I leave it off to one of you because I just talked.
Just leave the blanket statement. What makes a godly man? I think.
Go for it.
Well, I think I'll lead out in this one just because I think the reason why you brought up that I had brought it to you is because I was contemplating myself and wondering in the church is what does it mean to actually be a godly man, especially in the North American culture? I think there's a skewed view of extremes on either side. There's an extreme that you have to be this super macho guy that has zero emotions and can't express anything but be this hardcore, patch on one eye, ready to take down a bear at any point, and that's what makes you a man, which I think actually plays into it to a point.
Yep.
But they take to an extreme, and then there's another extreme where it's people are trying to take masculinity away from men. Where it's if you do any of those things, you're not a man. Like a man, you need to be feminine, and you need to be expressive, and you need to be able to do all these things. And so it's that wrestle, and I've wrestled with it personally too, is what does it actually mean to be a man, a godly man? Because there's different extremes and definitions, and I don't think either of them are completely wrong, but I think there needs to be a balance in the middle of what makes a godly man. Because there's a man like David who was extremely manly, literally took down Goliath as a child and with a stone. And then there's countless stories of him taking down lions and protecting his sheep, being taking and slaying people in battle, a manly man. But then you read the Psalms and you hear about David expressing himself in a very poetic and what we would classify in a almost feminine way.
Emotional way.
Emotional. There we go. Maybe I shouldn't use feminine, but I guess I'm just using that because that's what.
No, you're right. That's what
the
culture.
lens.
That's the lens that
lens,
people
yeah.
throw it at, and so it's but then yet he's expressing himself in a way that eventually Jesus takes that and says he was a man after God's own heart. And so it's if David, who was a man after God's own heart, had both. I think that's where I start to look at, what does it mean to be a man of God? You need to be this strong-willed guy and lead, and be willing to fight for things that are of God. But you also have to be able to open up your heart to actually express yourself to the Lord and others. And I think that's what someone makes a healthy, godly man. And I don't know, I'm still learning myself about what it means to a man. I've had different people talk about it. But I think I'm going to start to open up with a can of worms.
No,
with
it's
that one.
great, yeah.
it's a good can of worms. And I'll say this because I want to hear Cam's opinion. But one of the things that I learned very early on from my very first head pastor, he used to say this to us all the time, and it annoyed me, but it stuck with me now. He said, Logan, the truth is in the tension. So he did this thing where he got two real butch brothers that worked out all the time, and they're just giant meatheads in a good way. And he got them on stage, and he made them like take one of those like workout bands, and he stretched it across the whole sanctuary. And then he like had them hold it there the entire service. And he was like, yeah, he's like real hard trying to win on your side, isn't it, boys? You know? And then and they're constantly pulling because he was playing off the competitive edge of two brothers. And I was like, okay, I like this. And then it's kind of like a slack line. Safest place in a slack line is actually near the middle because you can get that right point where you can be perfectly balanced. And that's where you're right. There is somewhere in the well, you're right, but it's somewhere in the middle of both of those dichotomies that makes a good godly man.
Yeah.
So to encourage you on that one.
Yeah.
Now I want to hear from our guest.
Yeah, no.
Put him on the
Yeah,
spot.
thanks for having me, first of all. Yeah, thank you. But yeah, no, to play off kind of the side you're talking about, Bryce, the emotional side. So my lens, I would like to believe, is fairly unique, where I grew up with a single mom. So yeah, at the age of 12, I had to learn pretty quick, what it meant to be a man and, step up and be there for my mother. And so then I was constantly seeking like friends' dads for help or just to see, how they acted with their spouses and whatnot. And it just all comes down to, the lens you are given when you're a child, basically, right? So you're in a unique position now because you have a newborn. And so just to see, baby Hudson, for those of you who don't know Hudson, he'll just, he'll have this lens of, both sides of a family, right? And so when my mom, I was very in touch with my emotions as a child, and I consider myself to be, I'm a creative person, and so I'm in touch with that side. And but it's definitely been a strenuous, upbringing where, I had all my jock friends, basketball, hockey friends, and here I am, trying to do music and stuff on the side, and so it's like this battle of, what does it look like to actually be a man? And I think when it comes down to it, a good Christian man is very self-aware of those sides, right? Of being strong, emotionally, and whether you want to say physically or not, but just in general, being strong as a person and being aware of your just well-being, right? And so, and then being able to bring God into that self-awareness is the next step that I've always struggled with, and like that's something you learn when you're a boy, and then you pick it up as you go on. And so that's kind of where I'm at these days, is where it's getting the help with that self-awareness, getting the help, when you're feeling emotional, right? Just it's okay to not be okay, right? It goes into men's mental health. Like we've been capped. Like men have been suppressed, I guess, in a sense, where it's like, obviously it is okay to speak about your emotions, and if you're not doing well, talk to somebody about it, preferably an older person. But so that's kind of just my 2 cents right off the top, is just the self-awareness thing is huge. And so being aware of your emotions is definitely part of being a man, and don't let anyone tell you different.
No, exactly. And I just to add on, I also only grew up with just my mom. So I understand like almost exactly, I think, to what you're talking about, because even as a kid, I didn't want to tell my mom what I was feeling, because not only is I think it was more that I didn't want to make her upset with my problems.
Totally.
But I think all of my friends' dads and uncles and everybody was like, all of my I'm the outlier in my family. I'm the only one with a degree. I sit and write and read and create stuff. My brother is like, he runs a gravel pit. My other brother details cars and fixes them. Like, I am the complete opposite of that. And it's just very funny that, in a good way funny, that we ended up like so close, but so far apart in that way. And how each of us like had to learn to like be a man. Like, I'll be brutally honest. I learned how to shave by watching a YouTube video.
Amen. No,
Like,
seriously.
And I laugh at that, but it's like, it's just the way it had to be. So.
No, I think it's when you bring that, it's like the thing that came to mind actually was like what collect my words here.
Baby brain, it's okay.
baby brain. Yeah, we'll blame it on that. My wife's stepdad, he is a mechanic, and recently, it just reminded me of a story when you were saying that. It was like recently he was helping someone. They'd gotten a new boat, and it was a man. It was a father, and he was married, and Ashley's, my wife's stepdad, was going to help him get this boat ready. And he was just flabbergasted that this grown man didn't know how to back up a boat or like set up a hitch or do anything that he was like, I thought every man knew how to do this. Like, grown man just knew. But it came and he realized like that was his upbringing. His upbringing was all around mechanics and being like working with tools. And similarly with me, like, I grew up with my dad teaching me how to use a hammer, how to rip apart a carpet, to do carpentry and like a lot of things and work hard. And so I grew up that, and then I have my good friend Bryson, and he didn't grow up with a dad as well. Barely knows how to use a hammer at times. Not mocking him or anything, but it's like that was just his upbringing. Nobody taught him how to do that. So if there's not someone there to teach you that, we can't actually just say that's what makes a man, because actually it's up to discretion. It was like you guys have totally different upbringings than me. So what I see as a man is going to be different. And just like what Ashley's stepdad saw, he's like, it just blew his mind. He's like, wow, maybe there's something more to being a man than just knowing how to back up a trailer.
Yep. I'm be honest, don't know how to back up a trailer.
That's okay. I do know how, but I'm not very good at it.
Yeah, it takes a couple tries for me as well.
It's reverse.
And then so to add on to that, I grew up with a stepdad eventually as well, and so his background is trades and construction and oil field, and so like, all of those check those boxes, right? And so when I first saw him come into the picture with my mom and I obviously got very defensive for many reasons, but then seeing how in quotes manly he was very hard for me, because it's like the classic, oh, you're not replacing my dad, but like, how am I supposed to live up to your standards now? And I was playing basketball but also playing music, and those two things didn't, like, he was like, oh, you're not gonna do anything with those, it was like those mentality. But then we built that relationship of believing in one another, and so now, like, where we are now, he has taught me so much about it, and like the job I'm in currently, I'm in the trades, and a lot of my knowledge is from him, so yeah, it just depends on who your mentors are growing up, right? Like, you gotta seek those people, and if not, God will put them in your life whether you like it or not. So.
And I think that is like a good like transition point, in that a good like godly Christian man is somebody that, I mean, let's be real, it's the easiest answer in the world, relies on God. Who would have thought? But I'm just blown away how similar our stories have turned out to be, because I have the exact same style of relationship with my stepdad, but that's for another talk. I wanted to just talk about some biblical foundations for what is a godly man. And I want to clear the air right now for everybody listening. We're not saying that being a godly man is more important or above or superior to being a godly woman. That is not what is being said here. It just, God has different things in store for different people. Whether you are a male, female, or whatever. There is certain things that he has asked of a male and of a female. That's the reality. That's what it is. And so I want to use the Bible as the foundation for that. And so one of the first verses that I am going to read is Psalm 1, verse 1 to 6. It's the first one. It says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and his law mediates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruits in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous." There's some strong imagery that David's using in
Talking
this
about a
song.
poet again.
Yeah, exactly. Very poetic. But the idea is that a good, godly man is not somebody who lives a double life, one as a sinner, one as a saint. That's kind of what it boils down to in the end. Of a good, godly man has integrity, and it's shown through the fruits of his labor. Right? We see that through the tree by the stream. The tree is us. The stream is God's word. It's our life. It's our relationship with God. It's flowing. It's moving. It's what feeds us. That's the basis, I think, for a good, godly man is one that has integrity and has a strong, lasting relationship with the Lord, which is what both of you said. But we see the biblical foundations for that here. Now, to clarify, that is also the same for women, by the way. You'll come to realize there are a lot of similarities between what is godly female and godly male. So there's that one. And then, Bryce, when we did some you wanted, I'm not sure if you have it, but you said you really liked the next verse, so I'd like you to read it.
Psalm 119, verse 9 to 16 was one that, like, when I was in my last year of Bible college, and before I came into leadership here at Bethel, it just really spoke to me because I thought it was such a powerful passage to young men, especially myself. Being a young man, this is what it says. "How can a young man keep his way pure? By guarding it according to your word. With my whole heart I seek you. Let me not wander from your commandments. I have stored up your word in my heart, that I might not sin against you. Blessed are you, O Lord. Teach me your statutes. With my lips I declare all the rules of your mouth." And so it's just like, for me, it was like, a young man, or just a man in general, it's like it's so hard. Even, and this is writing in David's time, how is a young man to stay pure? There are so many things, images, like temptations left, right, and center for a man to drift and go in a different direction that isn't the way of God, that isn't that stream of life. But yet it's like, how do we, King David is saying this, is like, how do we stay on that path? Well, it is to keep ourselves pure by guarding it with the word of God. Right? The more time, a man of God is someone who spends time with the Lord, who has fellowship with the Lord. As we have fellowship with the Lord, as a man, I believe we're called to lead. And as we lead, how are we to lead if we don't know how to be led by the Lord? How are we supposed to be godly men if we're not first going to have fellowship with the Lord? And so this passage kind of makes it clear, fellowship by talking with him, but also by reading his word, speaking with him. And so it's just like, I don't know, for me this one hits really different, and then let it not just be head knowledge, because sometimes guys can also think like we're so headstrong, like I know what I'm doing, stubborn,
Pride.
Oh, yeah.
prideful, right?
Yeah.
But yet at the end of the day, it was like, it's not about what we know in our minds, but it's what we know and live out in our hearts.
Yep.
So, yeah, I love that passage.
I think
That's great.
to be a good leader, because Christian men are called to lead.
Yep.
Whether you're called to lead your household, your family, whatever, we're called to lead. That's just the mantle of responsibility that God has given to the men. That doesn't mean women can't be leaders, okay? I'm gonna try. We're not answering that topic today. I just wanted to clarify that doesn't mean men can't or women can't be leaders as well. It just means that the mantle of responsibility has been given to the men. And with that, Bryce said it. Again, this goes back to Bible college. I hated hearing this because it was repeated to me so many times in my first year. To be a good leader, you have to first be a good follower.
Classic.
Classic,
Yeah.
right? But that is, like, that's true in the worldly sense. Like, how are you going to lead people if you've never been led? But in the spiritual sense, we need to be followers of Christ. And that's the way it is. And to be a good godly man, that's where it starts. So I think there's that. Now, Cam, I don't know if you have any other, if you have any scripture things that you brought to the table, or any just scripture you have that might add to what we've been talking about that might not be put you on the spot. And if you have nothing, that's okay.
No, that's perfect because I do have something, believe it or not. And it's a pretty generic passage of scripture. It's Romans 1:16.
Yep.
It's your classic. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, and for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. Right, but the part that I always stick with. I originally first heard this verse mostly from listening to a hip hop artist. His name's Andy Mineo. And shout out to the 116, right?
Yeah.
And that's what their whole entire record label is based around. Is this being unashamed, right?
Yes.
I am unashamed, and that's been like the album for Lecrae. Like he wrote a book. It's called Unashamed, and that's just how to live your life basically as a Christian is just to literally be unashamed of the gospel, and unashamed that Christ is in you, the Holy Spirit is in you, and so bringing that into and to wrap around to what we were talking about before, just being unashamed of who you are as a person. Is very manly, and because there you can stumble into some pride with that one, you can get an ego going, but just being unashamed that God has your back and that you don't have to be shamed when you're emotional, when you're feeling sad, when you're depressed. Those aren't shameful things. Those are human things to feel, right? And so just bringing that to God, is like step one in infinity.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
And God gave us emotions.
Yes.
Like, I'm sorry, men, if you're listening to this and you might disagree with that. That's the reality.
Mm-hmm.
We're created in His image.
Yeah.
God has feelings.
Yes.
And I plan on doing a whole other. Now, I'm saying this on the podcast now, so it means I have to do it. So I'm keeping myself accountable. Movember. It's an organization that you fundraise for men's wellness in general. Often it's prostate cancer, or they kind of pick a different theme every year. But the thing that they've always supported in the last couple of years has been men's mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the people listening know this or not. There are more men that commit suicide than females.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And when they commit it, it's more extreme.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to do a whole other episode based on men's mental health, and it's going to wrap around the idea that it's okay to share your feelings. But it's true that there are more men that commit suicide than females because for so long, like Bryce said, the culture has said a manly man is somebody who sits down, shuts up, and doesn't talk about their emotions, and is strong like an oak and is unmovable, and those are great things. Don't get me wrong. But even an oak gets knocked over in a windstorm, and it's how often, and it's only a matter of time until that happens.
Yeah.
And so part of being that good godly man, like Cam has said, is and if we are truly unashamed of the gospel, of the things that God has done for us, then none of that stuff matters. And that's like a good godly man. Now, I want to ask Bryce, and then I'll get to Cam.
Yeah.
I want to know an example from your life of like that godliest man that was just like that one person, that was just like, that's it. That's like,
Yeah.
I'm not. I know I didn't put this in the docket or whatever, but I think it will really help us articulate what we see as like a godly man by expressing it like through somebody else.
Yeah. I have a couple people in my life that have really shown me what it means to be a man of God, and both of them were fathers. One of them was actually my youth pastor from when I was in high school. I went to 2 youth groups, and his name was Tim Harrison. Tim Harrison was one of the most patient men I have ever met. Very, very godly, very spiritually led, and the way he welcomed me and my friends into his house, like there's very few people he let in, like more than what he did with us. And he showed me what it was meant to be patient. He has 2 little girls, to be patient with them. But then also, I remember he took us on a missions trip to California. And I was just I was so emotional as a kid. I was all over the place, like struggling with just depression and a lot of things. And I remember before that we even went on that one, I went to him and he was just like, "Come sit with me. Let's talk. Let's talk how this is going." And I remember him actually, when I told him I was depressed, he shed a few tears. He started weeping for me. He started, because he felt like, he was like, "I don't want this for you." And then he took me underneath his wing, and he actually started like being almost like a Christian father for me, in a weird way. I wasn't as much as some of my other friends that would go there, but he just walked with me along the ways. I remember one night when I was on the brink of like wanting to kill myself. I showed up at his house. I don't even know how I ended up there. And he woke up and just walked with me. He walked with me around the block, and I'm just sitting here like, who would do that? Who would actually do that? And like, he wasn't afraid to express himself. He knew when to be strict. Like, he knew when to kind of raise his voice a little bit and be like, hey. He knew how to work with his hands. He actually renovated his entire house, and like built his like landscaping in his backyard. But he was, I don't know. He showed me what it meant to be spiritually sound. He showed me what it meant to be like a true godly father, with the way he treated his family and the people around him, to be inviting. And so to me, that was an example to me of what it meant to be a godly man, because he just lived it. He showed me that it was okay to be emotional. And that is like, no matter how much someone's going to frustrate you, he showed me the grace of God. Because I did not deserve the grace that he gave me. I was a little rascal. I was a troublemaker, man. We ran away in California. Like, literally, me and my friend David, we were in Venice Beach, and we ditched him for some girls on the beach.
Guarantee you, half the people listening would be like, "Yeah, I've been there."
And then instead of him getting like absolutely furious with us, because he had every right to, like most people, in fact, I think about myself as a youth pastor, I would have freaked out.
Yep.
He's in charge of us. He's responsible for us. But instead of losing it and getting super mad at us, he chose to be silent. He prayed with the Lord, because I've talked to him with it since. And I was like, "How did you do it?" And he's like, "I sat with the Lord and I prayed." And he was able to extend grace, not kick us off the trip, but talk to us quietly and show us Jesus in the midst of it. To me, that's a godly man. Someone who has the ability to, any man has the ability to lose it at any moment. Mm-hmm. But yet, someone who can control that is a real man to me. And that's what like Tim showed me.
That's good. Yeah.
Do you have somebody, Cam?
Yeah, for myself, well, as soon as you brought that up, I didn't start panicking, but like my mind just started racing of like, oh yeah, there's been so many, honestly. But like, go back to just my upbringing, right? I would, move on to the next mentor or father figure or whatever that was for me as a kid. I would always move on to the next one, fairly quick with how life, goes on. And so 2 people that really have stuck in my head recently. And so the first being just after my dad passed away was our home pastor, I guess. My mom and I never went to church until my dad had passed away, so we had to fill his void, right? And so we started going to church, and so the pastor, his name was Al Stebbing, and just the kindest old man. And, he'd get down to your level. I was 12. He'd get down to my level and smile. That's all it took. It was just a smile, like, my superhero, my dad was dying, and he just smiled. He said, things are going to be okay. You're going to grow into he was just there. He was just there for me. And that's one thing that I've always looked for, in a father figure or just when I'm asking myself what it means to be a man, especially in a relationship, to just be there, you know? And I think that's just a huge thing. And so the second person is my previous boss. His name's Randy. And he is a local businessman, and he goes to church, and he has a family. And I've seen him, you know, steam coming out his ears, being, you know, furious with the day or how if things are going wrong, you know. But it always comes back to the grace, right? Like God's grace is in a godly man, and so like through the trades, you're gonna see some, you know, unfortunate things and just some crappy circumstances and customers and other tradesmen and whatever, and others never forget. He can just tone it back in, you know, and that's how he is at home too. He has so much and patience. That's the word I'm looking for at the end of the day is patience, and to just have patience is such a godly attribute, and then so when I first moved to Brandon as well, my anxiety used to just be like through the roof, like bad, you know, and panic attacks, you know, where I would, you know, not be able to move and just couldn't breathe, and like I've been hospitalized for it a couple of times here and there, and so. Being on a job site, there was one day I was just particularly going through like some family trauma and everything, and I had to step outside because a panic attack was kicking in, right? And Randy had saw this, and we were painting a person's house, and he's like, no, let's step outside, and it's you know, February probably, so it's a nice February day, believe it or not. So the sun was out, but it was cold outside, so we went and sat down on the steps though, and I'll never forget that. He just, you know, sat me down, and we're on a work site, right? And then he started praying for me, you know? He just was calm and just said, you know, God, give Cam patience, give him peace, give him grace, and, you know, just know that he's enough. It was just a simple prayer, you know? But he took the time out of he got off the ladder, came down, you know, took me outside and just put everything aside, and he was unashamed to be a Christian man in that moment. The customer was inside, you know, and they had just had like discussions about pricing, blah, 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 you know. And so he just shut everything down, and, you know, it's going to be okay. And so that's what I look for, and, you know, in a father figure and a spiritual mentor. It's just, the patience for the person and the grace, like you're saying. And it's so,
I think you both hit on two really important things of what we just talked about as like a godly man, patience. Mm-hmm. You both talked a lot about patience. Mm-hmm. And that's really, really important, because I think too many times men are seen as like the disciplinary, tough, like people. And there's a place for that. 100%. Absolutely. I know to this day, my mom ain't going to really get that mad at me. That's just the way it is. But my stepdad, he'll whoop me. Right? But but he does it out of love, and he does it with he even does it patiently. Now I'm gonna be 25. I'm not really getting whooped by my stepdad anymore. But that is still there, and I think that is really really important. And for me, I have two. One was also my youth pastor, Ben. I also went to 2 youth groups, and Ben was a youth pastor, and he was like the first mentor I ever had. He was amazing. He knew I didn't have a dad, so he would just sometimes just pick me up from school, back, you know, when you could just pick a student up from school and everything. Yeah. And we just go to his house, and he was building a business where he refurbed cars. Now, I still don't know that much about cars. I'm decently handy now, and a lot of that's thanks to him. He would just order pizza. We'd sit in his garage, and we would just have pizza, and he would just work on cars. Now, half the time, it was me just standing there, not knowing what was going on, and he would just ask me to pass him stuff. And I did, happily, because it was just nice to be doing that. And obviously, he was super patient with me. But what made him stand out was his ability to actually get me involved, to actually call me to the mat and call me out on my crap and be like, no, that's not what you need to be doing. You should be doing this. right? Because I think a lot of times we godly men don't necessarily, we don't call people out because it's emotional. It's you don't want to put yourself out there. You don't want to do these things. You sit there and you take it. Or sometimes it's the complete opposite and you blow off the handles and everything goes awry. But he had this ability to teach me, to keep me accountable, to do things. And he's part of the reason I even started in ministry. Like, he was the one that got me my first opportunity outside of the church to do other ministry. I worked with him for YFC. So I did the Sleep on the Street challenge with him. So he just pretended to be homeless for a weekend. He was with me through it the whole time. He challenged me to go and panhandle, because that was one of the things we had to do, or raise money, or to do this. And he showed me that there is so much more to ministry than just doing stuff in the church. And so that would for me was really big. So I think patience, but I think the ability to have accountability is a big one. And then the other one is Aaron Sawatsky. Shout out Aaron.
Aaron. Yes, that's a good one.
Yeah, shout out Aaron. He's our camp director. Again, single family, so I don't even have a dad now. I have a stepdad, and he's great. But Aaron, I never actually worked under him. I've always worked alongside him, because that's how he does things. You're not an underling to him. Even the let's be real, even the grumpy teenagers that he has working for him all summer, he loves them so much. He loves them so much. And yeah, he probably has had to, he's had to discipline them once or twice for, staying out too late and being late to your shift in the air-conditioned candy shop.
Driving their quad too late at night.
Doing
donuts.
Jumping your golf cart across the ditch and stuff.
Never do that.
Couldn't be me. But when I moved back here, Aaron had found out that I was moving. I didn't tell anybody I was moving back. Nobody. Because I was I didn't want it to be this big thing. Very manly, right? And he calls me and he's like, hey, I heard you're moving. And I was like, how the heck did you find out? But obviously you found out. And he's like, I want to come help you move. And I was like, really? And I was like, it's kind of crazy. That's a direct answer to prayer, because my mom couldn't help. She was sick. I can't drive because of an eye condition. So anything like that for me is a big deal. And so I was like, yeah, actually, I would really love your help. So him and his wife came. They moved me, and that was that. Didn't say anything of it. You just did it with a smile on his face and was happy to do it. And I think that's the other part of what makes a godly man, is they need to serve. Everybody is called to serve. That is, we are all called to serve the church. But I think what separates a godly man, a Christian man, from a good godly Christian man, is that ability to just serve and do it willingly and so lovingly, right? Yeah, we have tons of people that do sound or play in the worship band, and they're all great and they serve willingly. But there is just something about, I'm sure, the godly men that you guys have had, that they just have this ability to just serve a little bit more, And it's I just think there's something to that, because there is a gift of servanthood. And I think that most godly men have it. Right? Look at everybody from the Bible that was a good example of a godly man. David. He served his people all the time. Sometimes not very well. My favorite, Joshua. He served the whole kingdom of Israel and gave them their land back. Or look at all the disciples. They learned to serve Jesus and to do these things. And now we're all called to serve, but I think there's that mantle of responsibility that comes with being a good godly leader, and that comes with serving. That comes with, I think, an extra level of servanthood. And I was wondering, what are your thoughts? Am I crazy?
On a man serving? Or?
Yeah. Is there an extra amount of serving that comes with being a godly man? And you can tell me no.
Well, it kind of just comes naturally, I think, as a father, right? I'm not a father, but
not yet.
not yet
Me either.
And so
I am a father.
but you can. It's just kind of an instinct almost to just, it's the good side of your pride, where it's oh, I want to be helpful, I want to be useful, I want to share my good deeds or deeds in general, right? And so it goes right to the Bible where, we're made in God's image. We're a reflection of Jesus, and Jesus served, like literally every second of his being.
Exactly.
And so, it's like the foot washing, as, like paint that picture, right? Like it's just going that extra step, the extra mile. And I think, it has to do a lot with just the fatherly instinct that all men to most degrees have, right? Where it just comes naturally.
Well, even Adam served Eve. We don't get a ton about their relationship, but you probably best bet that he was serving Eve. He was willing to lie for her.
Yeah.
So I think that says a lot.
I think when it comes to like serving as a man, I think that's an important part, but I think there's actually a healthy way to serve.
Absolutely.
I think because I think we can't deny, like you're bringing up what Jesus said, to serve. He said, I came not to be served, but to serve. Right? And so if Jesus came here to serve, he set in the example for all of us to walk in that place. And so if Jesus came and set the example to serve, we are too. But he also gave us the example of after he served, what did he do?
Yeah.
He went away. Right? There's a place to serve and recharge. And I think I've had godly men who have been incredible servants, but not for serving their own spiritual lives.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Good
And-
word.
And like incredible at like doing something, which I think can also be the part of that pride. As men, we want to continue to prove ourselves.
And be yes men. Yeah.
Yeah, we want to be like, I can do this and I can keep going. And that's another thing is that we'll burn out before we stop sometimes.
Yep.
And I think as a godly man, Jesus set the example for us actually to be able to serve others well, but also serve God well, right? And if we're going to do that, Jesus would serve and then go away and be with his Father. And he set the example for us as leaders, as men, of what we're to do as well. And because I think, again, we're too prideful sometimes, including myself, where I want to do more and more and more, and I feel bad if I stop. I feel like I'm not serving well, I'm not doing enough, especially I grew up doing trades.
Yeah.
The whole thing is if you stopped, you're lazy, and your foreman is going to yell at you.
Yeah.
And so I learned in the back, and it's an unhealthy habit that to keep on going, and if I stop, it's bad. But you know what? He even has the day of Sabbath, right, where we're a day of rest. Yeah. If these are the examples, and we're to be just like Christ, especially as men, we need to follow those areas as well. I'm guilty of it myself.
Me too.
But, I mean, talking about being a father, I want to teach my son to be a man of God. I already am. I pray over him regularly and talk to him, little pep talks, whether he's listening or not. I don't know. He's 2 weeks old, right? But I want to teach him to serve well and to rest well. And I think in order to serve well, we need to first learn how to rest well as well.
And
That's good.
and that's what we started talking about.
Yeah.
That was the first verse of like,
Yeah.
you have to have that connection to the stream of God to serve well. So like that was super well put. And I want to ask some just very specific questions now because we're young adults. Okay. And there are problems that we face as young adults that are completely new and have never been faced before. Right? And maybe they'd be similar, but I just want to get the elephant out of the room that nobody ever talks about when it comes to being a young adult male. How do we, as the scripture put it in Psalm 119, stay pure in a world that tells us it is wrong? So how do we as men stay pure? How do we stay away from pornography? How do you stay away from falling into hookup culture?
Yeah.
The dating apps, social media, the facade that is these things, because those things aren't inherently, well, let's be real, porn is inherently bad, but like social media isn't actually inherently a bad thing. A dating app isn't inherently a bad thing, but we have completely manipulated it and culture has completely turned it into a bad thing. So then how do we as young men go handle that? It's a real big question.
Yeah, no,
so I
that's
don't think there's
doors wide open on that one.
Yeah.
My 2 cents, real quick. The first thing that comes to mind, and I learned this at Bible school. It's a pretty generic. Maybe it's a Sunday school thing, but one of my profs, he explained how, the devil is obviously deceivious, and he plans, or he tends to deceive a person more, and he uses this acronym. It's HALT, HALT, and so the devil will deceive you most when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, right? And so
That's good.
yeah,
That's
so
really
That's
good.
powerful.
but think about that. When you're hungry, you get hangry, and that's just okay. Well, I'm just gonna eat this instead because it's quick, or and then you just unhealthy starts. It just spirals, and then like when you're angry, that's when that pride kicks in, that ego kicks in, and then lonely. Like how often do you sin when you're alone? All the time. Like
Literally
that's
all the
just
time.
that's how the devil works, right? And then tiredness is like, it's 2022 and everyone is tired. COVID, everyone is tired. And so the devil's constantly working. And so as a godly man, it's always been my intent, to try and stop those four things from, getting horrible. You're always going to be hungry, angry, lonely, tired. It's going to happen. But it's to what degree you're letting, certain things move in those times, right? And so, when you're hungry, God provides, and when you're angry, God is peace, God is love. When you're lonely, you're not alone. Jesus is right there with you. When you're tired, you can rest in God. You don't have to rest on your own shoulders. So that's, I don't know, that's kind of what I...
No, that's good. I mean, I think that's interesting because that's exactly how the devil tempted Jesus.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? When he went in the desert, like he tempted in so many of those ways, like with the pride, the hunger. And so I think that's exactly it. And like, I think what you're saying is like, I like how you said it, where it's like, these are inevitable almost. Like you're going to face these things, but it's learning to cope with them.
Yes.
Learning that is like, there's the passage that is like, in all things, Jesus, like God gives you a way out. He will not tempt you beyond what?
Yes.
And he will always give you a way out. And so even like the way you're saying that is like, when you're tired, what are you going to do? Well, if you're tempted to go and view porn when you're tired, well then maybe at that point, if you're alone, right, loneliness and tired often play into, at least that was my weakness, was for pornography, loneliness and tiredness.
Yeah.
Phone someone.
Mm-hmm.
Someone, talk to them, get it off your mind, and then go back. Pray. If there's nobody else there, try and pray. Right? Bring it back to the Lord. Accountability.
Yes.
I really like that. That is really a really good way of putting it.
My jaw actually dropped. I can't wait to watch this later when I edit it and just watch me just go.
No, that's
Holy.
really
well,
good
hey,
way of
all
putting
props
it.
to Ken Esau of Columbia Bible
there you
College.
go.
He
Shout out.
helped me with that one, but yeah.
That's clippable right
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, well, if I can continue off that too, is like, I think when it comes to the pornography and things like that, men need community. Men need men. We need other people. Let's be honest. Like
Iron sharpens iron.
Iron sharpens iron, and you're not alone. If I'm honest, like almost every guy I've talked to in the church has struggled with pornography, masturbation of some sort, and it is a real thing. And so it's like you need each other, and genuine accountability.
Yeah.
Like check in with each other. Like, how you doing?
Yeah.
How have you been? Don't check in with a female. That's not healthy.
Oh, that's
not,
a bad idea.
That is not a good idea. But find those men and find that community that you can check in with each other and hold each other to a higher standard. Right? We're to uplift one another and empower. That's another thing about being a man of God, is we lift each other up.
Yes.
We're strong when other people can't be strong. Right? And that's what I've noticed in there. Every time I've tried to, the way that it was described, white knuckle it, where I'm just like, I'm going to do this. That's pride. Every man faces it. That's when I usually fall the hardest. But when I face it with a community, even if I do mess up, they're there for me and they pray for me, and we encourage each other to keep going and fighting the good battle. And so that's my way of like adding on to what you already hear.
No, it's great.
That's a great way of putting it.
Oh, that's
so.
amazing. I truthfully don't really have an answer besides like get an accountability partner. I mean, like truthfully, like actually find somebody that will truthfully keep you accountable. Because a lot of the time, let's be real, the accountability partner you find probably struggles it with themselves. So it's trying to understand that like you actually need somebody that will like genuinely keep you accountable. And I have fallen victim to finding an accountability partner that kind of slacked off. And it sucks because it's definitely like, well, you want the change and they don't, so then you have to find somebody else, which is difficult. But find somebody that actually is willing to like be accountable to you and be open.
Well, yeah,
with you.
with accountability comes vulnerability, right?
Yes.
Like you have to you have to be vulnerable in those situations. Like there's such thing as oversharing for sure, but it's a two-way street, right? Like you have to be vulnerable and the other person has to be willing to be vulnerable as well to find that common ground so you can keep building each other up. Because if just one person's sharing, then it becomes it just becomes toxic eventually, and some sort of to some degree, right? But accountability always needs vulnerability to a very strong degree.
The one thing I add on yours is I've fallen victim. Don't take victim card and blame them.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Don't blame your accountability partner because they're human as well. And like it was like they're gonna maybe slip up, forget, and we're like, life gets busy too, especially as a young adult. We all face that. I do believe accountability partners need to be true to being accountability, but don't blame them for your slip up. That's not being a man. No. You have to take responsibility for realize it is your responsibility. They can't be there with you all the time. Eventually, you have to be the one who own up to your own mistakes, your own things that are going on. You realize this is my thing, my battle, but I get to do it with people. You cannot pin it on other people. I just want to bring that up because I think I've done that myself, where I've just been like, it's because my accountability is no good, so I can just slip up because they're no good. But actually, it's not their fault that I am struggling with it. In fact, they're probably if I reached out to them more often, they probably would respond more, right? We can't put all the weight on their shoulders to hope that they're going to change me, because the change has to come from, first, the Lord allowing to work in our hearts. We have to do the change. Man up. Man up. Like we're talking about being a man. Man up. And take accountability for your own actions.
I mean, that's what that's ultimately what David had to do.
Talking about taking actions on lust and.
I almost wonder. We don't have enough time for it today, and I'd love to I'd love to talk about David another time. But one of the things that he ended up doing well in the end was being like, I messed up. Like, he recognizes it in the end. I mean, pride comes before the fall, which we talked about with the white knuckling, and then even toxicity can lead to pride as well. And so it's just a dangerous road. But one of the things that we as men, and I'm just going to restart. Wow, bad podcast host over here. I'm just kidding. Being a godly man, I guess we could wrap it up into like 3 words that we've kind of really talked about in this episode. I'm trying to think about it. So one was patience. That was a big one that we all had mentioned in our godly leaders, that a good godly man is patient. A good godly man is godly. So in terms, we'll say spiritually devout. I'm not sure what's the word there for.
Well, servanthood.
Yeah. Servanthood. And that servanthood is two-way of you serve God, but you serve others. And then finally, men are accountable.
Yes.
Both for their own actions, but the actions of the people they care about.
That's biblical too.
It is absolutely biblical. I know that as the media person around here, that ultimately, if our live stream doesn't work on a Sunday, it's not poor 14-year-old boy's fault. It's mine. And that's that accountability. But I also know that there's accountability with Pastor Mike. I know that if I go to him, he will immediately have my back. keep me accountable to whatever is
Yeah.
going on. But he also keeps me accountable to God as well. He's like, hey, are you doing this? Are you doing that? And that's like what is like a good godly man, I think, anyway.
Yeah.
So
Of course.
good godly men are accountable, serving, patient.
Yeah.
Mhm.
At
That's
least
good.
from a young adult's perspective.
Mhm.
So I'm curious to hear how the other episodes go. But I want to give you guys this is your last chance, any last comments, questions you might want to maybe ask me. I don't know, but is there anything you guys want to get off your chest before we conclude this episode?
Yeah, one thing comes to mind for me real quick. Just accountability is super important, and to go back to the mental health thing, it's the classic cliche. It's okay to not be okay, and as a man, that's something I struggle with, and I know countless others that struggle with depression and anxiety, and my last little 2 cents here, I guess, is just make sure you reach out. Like that's a manly thing to do. Is just ask for help. Like like as unmanly in quotes as that sounds, just asking for help is one of the best things you can do for your life. Whether that is your youth pastor or your pastor, your stepdad, whoever, it's okay to reach out and the to tie it in to what a manly figure I guess looks like. There's this UFC fighter that's really big and prominent right now. His name's Paddy Pimblett.
Oh,
I think,
yes, I know Patty.
and he's compared to Conor McGregor. Like he just has this demeanor of let's get it done. But he's really funny, anyways. But he's like UFC champion in his weight class, and after his last fight, he did this little shout out saying, he was just very what's the word I'm looking for? Open about mental health, really. And so when he won his belt, he got the chance to talk on the mic real quick and said, if you're a man and you're struggling, reach out. And he said, I'd much rather have someone cry on my shoulder than, shoot themselves, as morbid as that is. But that's the way he put it. He said, because it's the reality, I'd much rather have a brother of mine, a brother in Christ, just cry on my shoulder for an evening rather than me crying at the funeral. Exactly. And so to end on a serious note, I guess that's that is a manly thing to do. Is to reach out and vulnerability moment for myself. I'm looking into therapy, which is it's a huge thing. Everyone deserves to go to therapy. No matter what age, what gender, anything. Reach out, be accountable, be vulnerable, and just be aware of those things.
Yeah. Good word. I think the thing that comes to mind for me, I think it's more just because I came from my dad being like, you need to be tough. Is real strength doesn't mean being super strong physically. Real strength means relying on the Lord for that strength. Real strength comes from the Lord. It doesn't matter how buff, how jacked, how many people you can knock out, or how many chairs you can carry in church, right? It comes down to, I need my strength first from the Lord. That's what matters. My strength first comes from the Lord, then, wherever that flows from there, that is true strength from the Lord. So look at Samson. Samson, I love Samson as a prime example. It was he was this super jacked dude, super strong, but his strength didn't come from his own, but it came from the Lord. And when we realize that the best strength is first from the Lord, we can do all things. And don't rely on being always the tough guy, because that's only going to get you so far.
Yeah. My last thing is, man, if you're listening, which I know some of you are, being a man doesn't mean exerting your power over other people. That's one thing we didn't talk about, and we don't have enough time to talk about it. But being a good leader does not mean being a good dictator. Those are two completely different things.
Yeah.
I know for a lot of men, like Bryce said, they think that true strength comes from power. No, that is not true strength. True strength comes from the Lord, comes from being there for your people, being there for those around you. That's the best men that you can have. I think of every great leader in history. I love Alexander the Great. You know why Alexander the Great was such a good leader? He charged first into battle before his men. That is what people remember him for. Not for necessarily trying to figure out the Gordian knot or winning these insurmountable fights against him. He was first to go into the field of battle with his men. That's what we should be doing as men. That's showing your power, is supporting the people behind you and around you, not standing at the back and exerting your power over them. So that's what I would say.
Oh, that's great.
But thank you, gentlemen, for coming on this episode of Forgiven. I feel like I want to have us on again.
I am so down to return.
There we go.
If need be.
Hey, there we go. I'm in. But thank you for coming, gentlemen. We're going to wrap up here. So we're on YouTube now, by the way. If you didn't know, we're on YouTube. Did you guys know that the Forgiven podcast is on YouTube now?
I
did
do
not.
now.
Well, there we go. So we had a couple episodes up there as a trial run, and then we took a good 3-month break. But we're back now. So please, if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button.
Mm-hmm.
Truthfully, don't hit the subscribe button. I don't really care if you hit the subscribe button. What I really want you to do is hit the share button. Because I don't care about the numbers of how many people are subscribed and whatever else. That's not why we do this. I care that more people are hearing and being empowered and being inspired. And the only way that we can do that is if you guys hit the share button. So please do that. Don't be ashamed, you know? And then if you're listening on Apple, Spotify, whatever, leave us a review. Because I actually read them, and I don't use it as a way to bloat myself. If I want you to leave a review, and if you hated it, I want to know why you hated it. Mm-hmm. So please leave us a review. And again, hit the share button, share the link around, tell your friends, tell your family, share this to your dad, share this to whoever. I want to hear other people's opinions, because this is the first episode in a series that is in a long series of what makes a good godly man.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be men about it.
We'll be men about it. We'll take the criticism on the chin. Thank you all for listening. If you want to get in contact with us directly, whether it be a prayer request, you have a question, topic, whatever, you can email forgiven@bethelbrandon.ca. I genuinely check all the emails that come in every time. I don't care if there's 1,000 in there. I will eventually read them all. It will just take me a little while. So please hit us up there. Thank you all for listening. Have a great day.